once again. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, and we'll be talking about the New Hampshire primary, as polls closed in most of the state already here as we're watching live. But I would like to introduce our co-hosts. First, we got Jay Carter, of course, also known as Timid, hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Just cranking the heater up a little bit higher because it's snow's coming down here. We've got a heavy snow warning. We're gonna have snow all day.
So you guys are getting it now. See, we had it here in New York, and then it rained, and it actually got a little warmer, and that ended up being a good thing, right? Because most of the snow and ice is now gone.
Yeah, it's I think it's supposed to, at least I saw it's supposed to rain in a couple of days. But this is pretty heavy because the snows, we've had like two snows so far this year, but they didn't stick. But this looks like it's gonna stay for a little bit.
See, I'm glad because you're usually ahead of us in terms of the time, right? But now you're kind of behind us because we got the snow first, and now you have to relive what we already went through.
Yeah, I'm hoping this goes away soon. So, but it does forecast for next week is like in the 50s again. So that'll be interesting.
That's what I'm waiting for. We were also joined, of course, by Sheba Abraham from the League of Women Voters. I know you don't have a whole lot of time, Sheba, but what's going on with you?
Oh, it's a lot going on. But I am kind of preoccupied with the Australian Open.
The
And
Australian Open.
yes, watching Coco and the other young lady that she played in the US Open. I
Oh,
think,
okay. They're women. When you said
right,
Coco, for a second, I
Coco
thought you
Golf.
were referring to an actual kangaroo playing tennis.
No, Coco Golf.
Okay.
Yeah, Coco Golf. And I forgot the other young lady's name, but they met in they played each other in the US Open, and Coco defeated her. So now they're in the Australia Open and they're going to meet again. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens.
I don't know why that tickles me so much. The Australian Open. I'm picturing them going, might or something like that as they hit the ball.
But you know what's interesting? There's a supermarket in the area in Dutchess County, and they're selling kangaroo meat.
Kangaroo meat in honor of the Australian Open?
No, not in honor of the Australia
Okay.
Open, just it's like, wow, they're actually selling kangaroo
All
meat.
right.
I was like,
Wait,
oh my goodness.
Sheba, I'm glad you brought that up. This is actually the perfect segue because before we get into the very serious topics here, there's actually something that's perhaps even more serious than that I wanted to bring up. And this relates back
Uh-oh.
to what we were talking about last week. So before the show, I went,
You got kangaroo meat?
I got Burger King. Now, remember we were talking about whether burgers in New York had mustard on them? We're going to see.
What kind? Is that the regular burger?
Got a regular hamburger, didn't order it any special way. Just a regular
Hmm.
hamburger. I got a cheeseburger as well, if that makes a difference.
And you
Uh-huh.
got it from Burger King.
Burger King, yeah. Yeah, have it your way. But all I said was give me a hamburger and give me a cheeseburger. I want to see. Now, here's the thing, Sheba.
Uh-huh.
I was telling Jay, this is the cheeseburger. When I was in the South a while ago, many years ago, my friends and I went into a Burger King. I think it was in Richmond, Virginia, or somewhere around there, and ordered burgers. He got his, and he was disgusted that there was mustard on it. Instead of putting ketchup as a condiment, they put mustard on it. And he
Right.
went to the front, and he was like, "Oh, this is gross. But I don't like that." And it was kind of a bonding experience with the lady, the cashier. She's like, "I don't really like it either, but I know that's what we do down here. I know you
Mhm.
New Yorkers do ketchup, we do mustard." So I was telling this to Jay. He was like, "Every Burger King everywhere puts mustard on the burger." I don't know that to be true.
The one that
No,
doesn't is McDonald's. McDonald's is just ketchup and onions.
Oh, look. Okay,
I,
well,
I thought here they put ketchup on. I didn't know they put mustard.
this looks like ketchup to me. There may
Yeah.
be mustard, but it's hard to tell because it's the cheeseburger. Why don't we get the one that's not the cheeseburger? Because I don't know if the yellow is just the cheese. Let's see. This is very important stuff because I can
I've
tell you,
had mustard on on a
and actually,
burger,
this
but
was Scheme. If we get
wasn't.
Scheme back on the show, he was on here once. He
Uh-huh.
can confirm his side of the story because he was taken aback by the mustard on the burger.
Mm, That tells me he ate mostly at McDonald's.
Uh, Here it is. Ain't no damn mustard on here. It's ketchup and pickles.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be mustard on there.
Not in New York. I'm
No,
gonna
no,
taste it.
not in New York. But I've had a burger with mustard on it, but it wasn't in New York. It was in the South.
There's supposed to be mustard on there. That's the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is it supposed to be cooked in or just put on top as a condiment?
No, put it on top.
On top.
Never.
Yeah.
I've lived in New York basically my whole life. I've been to Burger King many times. I've never had mustard on a burger in New York.
Uh-uh.
In the South, yes.
That is very surprising to me because that's the recipe for the hamburgers and cheeseburgers and Burger King is ketchup, mustard, onions, pickles. That
Now, I knew
Probably
probably
when it,
people in New York would revolt, and they wouldn't be having that. So they had to modify
right.
New York.
Yeah, when they first started out, probably that way, but as time went on,
interesting.
mm-hmm.
I'm looking at a post here. I'm looking at a post here on Quora, and it's saying that apparently outside of New York City seems to be an exception where they took it off because when they did testing in the 70s, New York City people didn't vibe with it. And so the most of New York State does have the regular
All right. Well, now we know what we're doing next week. We're going upstate somewhere. Sheba, how about you do it next time? You come back with a burger from Burger King. We can test it out.
Okay. Okay, well, I have to go because I know I'll see if they serve mustard in this area, but I would have to go a
Let
bit
us know.
further after. Oh, okay, I will.
It has to be Burger King though, because
Burger King.
McDonald's,
Yeah,
I know McDonald's didn't have it, but Burger King, their natural recipe for it was always with mustard on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm also curious, is New York City the only location that doesn't have it, or other locales also?
That's interesting. We need to get
Yeah, I
someone
don't know.
from Burger King corporate on the
corporate, if you're listening.
podcast.
Yeah, come on the show.
Right.
I just remember my boy Skinny being horrified by it. He's like, they put mustard on this. Oh my! He was like freaking out, having a meltdown. Still.
All right, we won't hold you. We won't
The
hold
response was
you.
basically ATL shoddy. Welcome to the South.
What?
No, he complained. He was like, how come you put mustard on the burger? And the response was basically ATL shoddy.
Okay.
Well, you're in the South now, right? This is what we do down here.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
yeah, but see, and that's why we're getting back to the cultural thing. That's why I guess the cashier must have known that because she was using that as a way to flirt, right? She was like, "Oh, like I know you guys who come in and don't like the mustard. You're from New York City. You guys are cool. I
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's very surprising. Either that or they're just being rebels. That's because
we don't. No, we don't tolerate that. And I'm actually surprised to learn, according to what we just saw anyway, that this is New York City specific. We'll test it out, like we said, next week with the upstate, because I kind of figured that it was more northern versus southern, right? I thought maybe in New Jersey it would be the same. But I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if I've had a lot of Burger King in New Jersey. Now I'm curious. I'm going to start having Burger King, I think, when I'm traveling at least, right? To see what they're doing there. Because I would be surprised. I'll be honest with you. If I'm at the Jersey Turnpike rest stop somewhere and they put mustard on the burger, I would be very surprised. We'll see. We will see.
Yeah, that's very, very surprising to me. So,
all right. Well, speaking of surprising, the New Hampshire primary is about over. I know some polls close at 8 p.m. Most of them, from what I understand, throughout the state closed already at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we should have results coming in. Of course, the main topic of conversation is on the Republican side, right? Who's going to challenge the Democratic president down to two people. I'm interested, perhaps even more so, on the Democratic side, because this isn't getting a whole lot of coverage. The fact that the incumbent president took his name off the ballot in New Hampshire because New Hampshire refused to comply with the DNC rules stipulating that South Carolina we get to vote first, right? This started with a letter from President Biden saying that South Carolina, as a very diverse state, should get the opportunity to weigh in on the presidential primaries first. New Hampshire took exception to this, saying that, no, we are the first to vote. In fact, Iowa is the first caucus, we're the first primary, and it is actually in our state law in New Hampshire that we have to vote first, which to me is kind of a funny law because it doesn't only affect that state, it affects what's going on everywhere, right? To say, I can understand the law saying that we have to be a certain week of the month or this time, but to say that we have to be before other states, I mean, that means that if another state were to push theirs earlier, that would affect what happens in New Hampshire also, right? They would have to make theirs earlier to compete. We got to go first. It's kind of like shotgun or something like that. It's kind of a funny thing. Like, this is our law. We have to be first. But that is their law, and that's very much a real thing in New Hampshire, right? They take pride in being the first to vote. Again, slightly different from a caucus, right? Iowa does the caucus first. New Hampshire is the first traditional primary. They weren't playing ball. They said, no way. In fact, one of the politicians, I think, in New Hampshire said that's laughable. The notion that we will let South Carolina go before us is laughable. So they're doing their thing. They're going first like they always do. The DNC responded by stripping them of their delegates. They're no longer going to have voting delegates at the convention, at least not now. Things could change, as happened in the past. But as of now, they don't have voting delegates at the convention, and the president took his name off the ballot. So you do have other candidates, Dean Phillips being the prominent one, on the ballot in New Hampshire. But in response to all this, the Biden supporters are waging a write-in effort. Now, the president himself has not endorsed this or commented on this, right? This is done ostensibly apart from his involvement. But the way the local Democrats see it in New Hampshire, I think, is it would be an embarrassment if the president were to lose, you put that in quotes, but still nonetheless, technically lose the first primary to an insurgent challenger, right? Especially a lesser known guy like Dean Phillips. So this is less about, I think, worrying that Biden could somehow lose the nomination. He's not. It's more about the perception of how this is going to look as a headline and maybe feed into the narrative that he's possibly a weak general election candidate in the fall. And so this is what we're seeing tonight. We're seeing the Biden supporters and I guess the more establishment folks in New Hampshire waging this write-in campaign to try to beat a guy who's on the ballot. So how is that going to play out? Curious to see.
Well, I have a question. Was that legal? Was that done legally with the president? Is that something that can be done?
We talked about on the show before. A primary is a party contest. So the parties can set their own rules for what happens there. And so the DNC is allowed to do that. They're allowed to strip them of their delegates if they don't follow the DNC rules. It's in violation of New Hampshire state law, at least, for them not to vote first. So they are voting first. And now what happens to these delegates? In the past, there was a controversy with something similar happening. And I believe a compromise was ultimately reached where the delegates got to go to the convention and get a half vote or something like that. And so maybe something similar will play out. In the long run, I don't know if it's really going to make a difference because whatever happens in New Hampshire, other states are going to get to vote. South Carolina goes next. You have the whole country that gets to vote. And so you're going to see where it falls at the end in almost all likelihood. In fact, it's near certainty that Biden is going to get the most votes and the most delegates naturally, no matter what the New Hampshire deal is. So it wouldn't even make a difference, right? But to New Hampshire, it matters because they don't want to be stripped of their say.
Right. But he knew that going into this race, what would give him the right, or why would he make that decision?
Well, this was before the race, right? This is a while back. He wrote a letter saying that South Carolina should go first. And we know the history with Biden in South Carolina, right? In 2020, he was one of many Democratic candidates. He did not win Iowa. He did not win New Hampshire, right? In fact, he was not a close second or even a third. I mean, he was coming fourth. He was coming well behind in the running. And it looked like he was dead in the water until he was essentially bailed out in South Carolina, right? And that's when you had the first Black voters coming in, many of whom had somewhat of a loyalty or an appreciation of Joe Biden due to his being Obama's VP, and where he was unable to gain any traction in those early states, which are very white, right? He did do extremely well in South Carolina, and that's what catapulted him to the nomination. And so, obviously this can be seen as a bit of a self-serving maneuver for him to say, even though he doesn't really have serious competition now, but it does seem convenient, or maybe it's just a payback. Maybe it's a thank you to South Carolina for how they helped him last time. But he's saying they should go first.
Right, but is he being bipartisan?
Well, it's not
because it doesn't sound
bipartisan.
like
It's about the
but
Democratic primary.
Democratic
right,
primary.
but still, what
Republicans
is he
can do
being?
their own thing, and nothing to do with what the Republicans do.
Right, but still, he's showing favoritism to a state
Mhm.
that he has won or that has helped him win the presidency. He's
Right,
showing favoritism.
right.
So you're going to either be, are you going to be for all the people, or are you going to be for that state or favor that state because they helped you get elected?
Well, is there something to the argument that you want a more diverse electorate to go first? I don't know. It's something that he threw out there. We did look at what happened in 2020. Of course, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg were the big winners. They both struggled to appeal to Black voters. That was their downfall, right? They did very well with the white liberals, but didn't really put together a larger coalition beyond that, one which would be necessary to win the Democratic nomination and certainly the presidency, right? They were limited in their appeal. And so I guess the argument here is that South Carolina is more of a test to see if you can put together a broader base of appeal. Although, to be fair, I do believe the Democratic electorate in South Carolina is mostly Black, right? We have to look at those numbers. So, I don't know how representative it is of the whole country or whatever, but you can certainly say that it's more diverse than those early states are.
Right, but see, Mike, when you're with the League of Women Voters, and the reason why I asked that question, we have to be nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
So
The
that to
Democratic
me
primary is not
shows
nonpartisan by definition. It is.
right.
This
No,
isn't
no, but I'm
partisan.
just saying I'm just saying, yeah, and that I understand. But in other words, what they're saying is that we can't go out and show favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
See, because as president, he has to listen to the argument of New Hampshire and South Carolina.
Right. But
So
he's not just a president, though. He's also a presidential candidate. Right. So he does have
So I'm saying
political component to what he does.
But,
And also, like I said, there is an argument now, you don't have to agree with it, but there is an argument that South Carolina should go first because it's more diverse and it represents maybe the electorate better than the early states do. That's,
right,
that's being
but what I'm saying
positive.
right, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk
Yeah.
over you. But what I'm saying from the position I sit in as being nonpartisan,
Mhm.
that shows he's more friendly with South Carolina than he is with New Hampshire.
Well, I don't think there's any doubting that. I mean, he got walloped in New Hampshire.
So that's what I'm, because see, I have to look at it from that. I have to look at it as from the league's, where I sit from the league's point of view.
Let's actually pull up.
And he's showing favoritism from one state than the other. That's my observation.
But yeah, I think that that's correct, right? He is saying South Carolina should get to go first. New Hampshire is not happy about that. So look at what happened last time. Can we?
It sounds all very childish. I don't think it makes a difference. If their votes are all going to count, it doesn't really matter who goes first. Like it should.
I agree and disagree with that. I just wanted to take a look real quick at the 2020 primary results. So he had Bernie Sanders coming Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg were essentially tied. They both got 9 delegates, but you had Bernie Sanders with 76,000 votes, Buttigieg with 72,000 votes. Amy Klobuchar came in third place with 58,000 plus votes. Elizabeth Warren came in fourth place with 27,000 votes. Joe Biden came in fifth place with under 25,000 votes. So maybe it is a way for him of getting back at New Hampshire and saying, listen, you guys had me in last place last time, fifth place of the top 5 candidates. South Carolina had me in first. I'm gonna rock with y'all.
I think it's more an optics thing than it is anything that really makes any difference. It's more like the first results that come in showing him as last. It's going to look like, okay, well, his whole campaign is possibly doomed to fail. If he comes in top at the first one, then it's like, yeah, look, see, I'm the man.
And then going on to the subsequent states, it makes him look stronger. That's why it doesn't matter who votes first, right? It doesn't matter in a sense that it's not always determinative. It certainly wasn't last time. Right. We were talking about President Sanders or President Buttigieg, if that was the case, right? They won the first contest. Ted Cruz beat Donald Trump in Iowa last time, right? And he said it was stolen and a fake election and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, these first states don't always pick the winner, but they do take pride in getting to go first because it does kind of set the tone and the narrative for what happens going forward. I mean, you can look at what's happening now on the Republican side. DeSantis dropping out. Why? He put all his eggs in the Iowa basket and didn't work out for him, and he lost his resources and lost his strength and his ability to raise further funds, right? Because they saw that he didn't have a strong showing there as he wanted to. So what happens in the early states matters, because you go state by state, right? You, especially in the beginning, it's one at a time. Then you get into Super Tuesday, and like everyone's all voting at the same time, all that kind of thing. But in the beginning, it's all we're talking about. We're talking about Iowa and by the way, the campaigns spend all of their time there. Think about that. Iowa goes first, right? So for that year prior to that first caucus in Iowa, the campaigns are spending most of their time, and the candidates are spending most of their time in Iowa, right? That's where they're opening their offices. That's where they have the most people, their ground game. That's where they're going to the county fairs and the state fair and all that kind of stuff. I mean, and that's why Iowa loves it. Maybe like we said, their winner doesn't always go on to win the whole thing, but they do get a lot of attention, and you can even argue it's a boon to their economy, probably, right? Just by getting
Probably is. I'm sure it's a boon to
all that activity happening there.
Yeah, I'm
But how
sure it
are
is.
they,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Shiva.
no, I was going to ask, how are the Democrats responding to that in New Hampshire
Well, okay, so here's the thing.
and South Carolina? How are they responding to what he just?
Well, South Carolina
President has
seems
just
to
done.
have changed. I'm sure, I can't speak for them, but they might be appreciative of the fact that the DNC made or tried to make them first and is now punishing New Hampshire for not complying. If you're in South Carolina, you might say, listen, the DNC is just enforcing its rules that it's set, and New Hampshire should play by the rules. If you're in New Hampshire, you're saying, which I'm hearing, that this is state law in New Hampshire that we have to go first, and we don't care what the DNC says. We're still voting first, and it's still going to matter. It may not contribute to the overall delegate count, but I think that was kind of secondary in the first place, right? Because, like we said, it's going to be reported who wins, and people are going to know who won, and then people will do with that what they wish in other states going forward, in South Carolina, et cetera. And then we're going to get a delegate count at the end. I don't think New Hampshire's delegates are going to sway, certainly not in this Democratic primary. They wouldn't have made the difference, right? But it's more about the narrative of it, I think, right? And the narrative here tonight is that Democrats in South Carolina, rather Democrats in New Hampshire, who are loyal to Biden, or at least who want Biden to be the nominee, are trying to get him to win with write-ins. I don't know how many New Hampshire voters are going to be persuaded to write in Joe Biden over anyone on the ballot, right. But that's the test, right? I mean, I think if he does very well in the write-in vote, it does make him look stronger maybe than people thought he was.
Yeah, because can that write-in be? Oh,
let me mention, this is kind of interesting here. This is from the Associated Press right now. The New Hampshire primary results, as the live reporting is about 14% reporting in right now, and Dean Phillips has 22.4% of the votes that have been reported at 2,600. Joe Biden, 0%. However, there are 73.3% unprocessed write-in votes.
Right. So most likely the write-in votes will be counted last.
And right. So
it looks like Biden is winning.
It could be, yeah. If Biden's only on there as a write-in candidate, he could be in that mix and still leading.
Do they have Marianne Williamson on that ballot, or is it just?
Yes. Okay. She's right now reporting in. She's in, aside from the unprocessed write-in, she'd be in second place with 4.3% of the votes at 509. And then there's like a list of like 10, 15, 20 other candidates, and none of them have any votes.
Right.
So very interesting.
So yeah, I mean, this really, I think, mostly affects the narrative going forward for the general election. I don't think anyone seriously thinks that Biden is going to lose the nomination at this point. But the question is, how strong of a candidate does he appear to be? And we know how perception becomes reality, especially in politics. So what is the narrative going to be coming out of that? And people will spin it their own way and what have you. But I think it would have looked weak on him if he would have lost, even if he wasn't on the ballot, as funny as that sounds, right? If the report coming out of New Hampshire tonight was Dean Phillips is the winner on the Democratic side, because we know we live in a world of headlines. People might not even be paying attention to the fact that, oh, well, he was not on the ballot because of this weird DNC rule and New Hampshire didn't go along with it. People might just look at the headline, Dean Phillips wins New Hampshire. And going forward, I think it would just kind of feed into that agenda of trying to portray Biden as weak for the general election, right?
I suppose, but I still think it's ultimately kind of you know, it's kind of crazy. I mean, the point is that you're trying to win, and then this, oh, well, we want to go first. No, we're gonna go first. Like,
Right. Yeah, it seems kind of.
yeah.
Right.
So gotta see what's gonna happen though.
But if there was a
Um,
headline tonight that Biden lost New Hampshire in the Democratic primary, you don't think that would have made him look bad?
sure, it would. Yeah,
Yeah.
it wouldn't look very good.
No.
Ultimately, if and you know, strategically, I do get it. But ultimately, you know, the numbers when they come out when they're voting, it shouldn't matter anything. It shouldn't matter at all because you know, however the votes that happen in New Hampshire, how they happen in South Carolina or wherever it is, they're going to be what they are. But I
That's
do get the
true.
optics part of it, and strategy of trying to say we
Mhm.
want that to happen.
Right.
So,
Right. And like we said, what happens in these states could affect other things too, like fundraising, for example, right? If the donors lose their faith in the candidate, the stories coming out are, someone didn't have a great showing, they underperformed in the state. They were expecting all these votes, but it didn't work for them. Maybe they had high poll numbers, but the polls didn't translate into votes. People in other states, donors, right, players in this game are looking at all of that. And it can certainly affect what happens going forward in the other states. And so that's why the order
well,
does
here's the thing.
matter.
Here's what's silly about it is that so if Biden pulls out of the primary or doesn't get on the ballot for the primary because of this
Mm-hmm.
rule, it doesn't stop the primary. It still
Right,
happened, and
right,
the results still come out. And
right.
his name, if he's not on the ballot, his name is at a greater risk of being lower on the results
Mm-hmm.
than otherwise.
Yeah.
And so he's not accomplishing anything as far as trying to make these positive optics
Well, right,
because
right,
he's making it more risky for himself.
right.
Uh-huh.
Except
He is.
his narrative is basically New Hampshire doesn't count, right? New Hampshire's not getting delegates. They wouldn't play by the rules, and therefore they're not going to
Well,
have a
what
say
rules are
in
they
who the
not
nominee is.
playing by?
Yeah, but
What rules are
that's
they not
all
playing?
The rule was that South Carolina got to go first.
right.
But
That's the
was that
DNC. That's
something
the DNC's
agreed?
rule.
The DNC passed that as a rule.
Yeah.
The DNC set South Carolina as the first state, and New Hampshire said our state law says we go first. We're not changing that. We're having a primary regardless. So the Democratic position now is, well, New Hampshire can have your primary. It's not going to count though. Doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. You're doing it for nothing, right?
But see,
But
here's the thing.
yeah, but his
That
supporters and people in New Hampshire are saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want the narrative to be that Dean Phillips just won New Hampshire. So they're waging a write-in campaign. Is Biden involved in that at all? Did he advise them to do that? I don't know, right? But people in New Hampshire are saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't want this to be the headline.
right. And
Right.
what I'm saying is like if Biden they're like we don't want this to be the headline. Well, I mean, there's nothing he can do with that if he's not on the ballot. Like he's putting himself more at risk for
Right.
that.
He took himself off the
That's
ballot.
what
He said,
happened.
I'm not going to qualify for the ballot in New Hampshire, right? There's still people
Right.
in New Hampshire who want him to be the nominee, and they're writing his name in.
Right. So
Yeah.
if he's doing it for the optics, for the strategy, and I get that that's, it can be useful to set the tone for what's coming up.
Uh-huh.
He's putting himself more at risk for him having a
No, but
negative
is he
start.
is he doing it for
Even
the
if wait,
strategy?
hold on a second, hold on a second. Even
Yeah.
if they say these delegates don't go to the convention, this primary doesn't count. It doesn't matter in the news. In the
Right.
news, Biden didn't win that primary, and
Right.
that's the news that you're trying to avert. And he makes himself more at risk for this by not
Is
being on the
he? The
ballot.
question is he himself taking that strategy? I mean, maybe he's just saying the hell with New Hampshire. I don't care. Maybe there are other people saying we want to make sure that Biden doesn't lose in New Hampshire.
And
Right,
it
but
could be, but
yeah.
if the point was that Biden won this other state last time, so we want to come out strong, looking strong.
Yeah.
This is what the optics are going to be. Then not
Right.
being on New Hampshire, since New Hampshire is going first, regardless if it's the rules or not,
Yeah.
then it is going to make him look like, he is at more risk of
Right.
not coming out strong like he wants to.
Yeah, no,
If
Right.
I'm sure his goal was for South Carolina to actually go first, right, and give him a big,
yeah,
strong, huge win. Even though, I mean, let's
right.
be honest, he doesn't have a serious primary challenger. I mean, I could see this really mattering more if there was someone that we thought maybe can give him a run for his money, but we don't have that here, so it doesn't
Right.
really matter at the end of the day.
Right. No, this, yeah.
You
I
know, it could
mean,
make a difference maybe in future elections if the DNC rules don't change and if there's always this tension between South Carolina and New Hampshire going forward.
Jesus Christ. I'm at the
Yeah,
same
who
time I'm looking
started
at
that
this.
all?
There's a crazy amount of people that are running in New Hampshire. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Somebody named Paperboy Prince is running.
Oh, love Paperboy Prince, is that it?
Mhm.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's like 30 people on this ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm putting my name on the ballot next
So it
time.
happens every time. The media doesn't tend to report it. They just stick with the major candidates. But
Right.
there
Mhm.
are always a ton of people running for president, and they do make ballots, and every state does it differently. So they're not going to be on the ballot in every single state, right? Necessarily. It's just you have to qualify for each ballot separately. And
Listen, I want someone to write me in on the primary ballot. Just do it.
just to say you got to vote president somewhere.
Just
Yeah.
do it. Someone write it's not gonna matter. Just go ahead and write me in. I'm gonna put it on my resume. Like, yeah,
Listen, it's always nice, right? You know, I get that when I look at the local election results and I'm not running in something, but I look at I'm like, hey, some people run a Mike Scala. That's nice.
yeah. So yeah, go ahead and write me in. You know what? I might write myself in. Why not?
There you go. All right, so we want to do the poll question of the week on this topic. See what the people out there think. So the poll question of the week is, should New Hampshire be stripped of its delegates to the Democratic National Convention for not following the DNC rule to allow South Carolina to vote first?
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. I mean, and you know, it does actually lead to an interesting question, I think, in the general sense of should the states continue to decide on their own when they're going to hold these and how they're going to do it all themselves without the DNC weighing in at all? I mean, should it just be completely autonomous to the states, or should the DNC be able to regulate it in some fashion? I mean, I'm not sure we just want a free for all. I mean, what happens if they all try to hold their elections on the same day or something?
Well, I think one thing that everyone has to keep in mind, and we've talked about it many, many times, is that this is an internal organization vote. It's not really the state vote. It's the
Yes.
internal organization vote in the state. So I wouldn't think the state itself has any input or should. This is a private
It's still
organization.
but it is still
It's
up to the
massive.
states. It still is left up to the states to conduct these elections, right? It's not like the DNC is coming in with voting machines and saying, "Come vote in our DNC sponsored machine." The state is still doing it as they would always do, right? It is left
Right.
up to the states. And the other thing I'll mention, which is kind of an aside, I guess, in New Hampshire, I guess this really emphasizes the point that the states kind of do it all differently. In New Hampshire, you don't have to be a registered Democrat or Republican to vote in the primaries. You just go, you take whatever ballot you want. And so you're seeing
Right.
now a lot of people are voting in the Republican primary because that seems like the more competitive contest at this point, likely is. So in New York, that's different, right? In New York, you have to be a registered Democrat to vote in Democratic primary, vice versa for the Republicans. It's not the same everywhere. You know, independents can vote in New Hampshire in the primaries. And so again, the states kind of do it as they do according to their law, but then you have the overarching DNC and the RNC on the Republican side coming in setting parameters, right, to try to maintain some kind of control over this. So there's otherwise it's just like a soup of 50 plus contests with no governor on them.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
We'll see how this plays out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it
Yeah.
plays out with hopefully it plays out in some way with Biden winning and just Trump getting stomped on totally. And this is the first step in that path.
Well, you know what, Sheba, while you're here, I wanted to ask you about the Republican side with Nikki Haley in particular, because she caught a lot of flack for her answers about the Civil War and slavery, and then saying that America was
As
never
well
a
she
racist
should.
country. And it was kind of interesting to me that she even felt, maybe it's a cultural thing, I don't know, but she felt that as a Republican candidate for president who comes from South Carolina, she couldn't say that slavery was the cause of the Civil War, and she couldn't say that America had a racist past. So, or at least she felt that way, right? I mean, it could actually end up undoing her politically, so maybe she should have said it, but she felt, right, that she couldn't say that. And she is someone who's, you know, not a newbie. I mean, she is the former governor of South Carolina, so she should have some kind of political instincts there. So for whatever reason, you know, based on her experience, she is thinking that she would not be able to admit these things. What do you think that that says? And do you think that's going to cost her?
Well, I think because she has no connection, direct connection to that past.
Mm.
So that may have caused her comments.
Being an Indian American.
Right. In a way to say, I think she was trying to be safe, but it didn't come, however she phrased it, it wasn't taken that way because, as I say, she does not have any direct connection to the Civil War or to slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be in her research when she did. I don't know about why she said America was not racist. I don't know where that came from.
Right, as Trump was lobbying racist insults at her.
Right. So I don't know where if she chose to ignore that or look over that. That's something to me sounds a personal issue with her. But with her talking about the Civil War and slavery, I don't think that, as I say, she doesn't have a connection to that era in any way. Like she doesn't
Do
have
you need to have a connection to that to be able
I
to
think you should.
acknowledge the history? I mean, why is it that she thinks it's so controversial for her as a Republican candidate to admit that slavery was the cause of the Civil War? Why should anyone be afraid to say that in the year 2024?
Well, the thing is, Mike, when you do your research, and it depends on how you research and what you want to say about slavery being the cause of the Civil War, I think she's done her research somewhere along the line. And I have seen...
Has she done her research in Florida?
Right, but she's done her research where I have seen that, and there are some authors that say slavery wasn't the cause of the Civil War.
But you know what?
But hold on. That the purpose of the Civil War was to unite the North and the South.
Unite? Okay.
Yeah, because at that time, listen, hold on. At that time, the North and the South were two separate, as you could say, countries. The South had its own money.
That was just during the Confederacy.
Had its own government. Yeah,
the Confederacy.
So they had their own government. This is
that was after war started.
I'm just saying research. When she's probably researched it in this way. I'm just saying what she might have researched in this way.
Yeah, so, you're being too nice, Sheba.
You're being a war on you. I think it'll bring us closer together.
You're being too nice, Sheba. You're being too nice.
Here's the thing, though. To me, because if you listen to her whole answer, when she got that question, she started talking about states' rights. And she was like, well, I think it was about states not being told what to do and basically choosing their own destiny. And so she's really defending the Southern position still. She's defending the Confederacy today, saying that basically they were justified in their war over slavery. That's what she's saying.
She's saying what?
Hold on.
I think
she's defending the Confederacy. She's saying that
that's what I'm saying.
To not be told what to do by the federal government. So she was basically saying the South was justified in their belief that they should have slavery.
And that's why she said what she did. Because she's saying, look,
doesn't that make it really bad? I mean, that's she's essentially apologizing for slavery. More than that, she's almost saying that it was the right thing to do at the time, or at least they should have been able to do it, right?
To what? Have slaves?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Wait,
that was
let me jump in
but
here.
See, the thing is that I'm not saying that. No, it wasn't right.
That's
what she's saying. You have to
she's
look at
insinuating that, isn't she?
Well, Mike, she's from the South. Do you think they ever gave up? Mike, let's be real. Do you think some of them in the South ever forgave the North for coming into the South?
At this point in time, you still
no, they didn't.
She's letting you know that no. And that's why she said it, so she could start trouble again, and it worked.
No. Listen, I think you're being too nice, Sheba, by saying that you kind of insinuated that she did research that was just wrong, and so she just happens to be wrong because her research was wrong.
I didn't say her research was wrong.
No,
Huh?
she knew exactly what she was saying.
I didn't say she didn't know what she was saying. What I'm saying is this, is that she was trying to say, let's say in a nice way, I'm still a Southerner, I'm for the Confederate. Wasn't that what
I
she
don't
said?
think this is what I think. This is what I
Okay.
wait. This is what I think. Look, she knows what the base thinks. The Republican Party, especially in the South, and those supporters and voters in the South are all going to argue states' rights. They're still fighting to keep Confederate flags up, right? This has been their position since
Yeah,
the end of the war. That since the end of the Civil War, the South
exactly.
rise again was their whole thing. And so she
Right.
knows that by coming out and saying slavery was the reason for the Civil War,
You
that
didn't say
she's going to
that.
lose every,
Okay.
huh? I know
Yeah,
that
I
she
think that
knows
you
that
did
if
say
she
that.
came out and
Yeah, she
said
said that.
that, she would
Yeah.
lose every vote that she was trying to get. She knew what she was doing. She knows there's certain things you cannot say
Do you think though
as a Republican candidate
in the
and then
South?
get any votes. She knows that, huh?
But I'm asking though. So do you think it cost her votes in, let's say, Iowa and New Hampshire? Do you think it's only something that helps her in the South, or overall, was it a smart political move for her to say that in a Republican primary?
I think for a Republican primary, for Republican votes, I don't think it's going to be an issue for her. I don't think it's going
No,
to be a problem. 'Cause
You don't think
I
it's one of the
think
reasons why she
because
came in third in Iowa?
no, I think even
no.
outside of that, a lot of Republicans will believe that. They'll buy that.
Hmm.
There is, I mean, we cannot ignore the
Does it?
race core of the
Sure.
Republican Party.
Sure.
And,
But
and
that's also kind of my point. The fact that whether it's true or not, her perception of the situation was, I can't admit that slavery was the cause of the Civil War because if I do, I'll lose votes in a Republican primary
absolutely.
in South Carolina,
Yeah, but
wherever.
yeah,
Just for her to
but
think
what I'm
that,
saying
doesn't that
is
kind of
that
show that there's, to say the least, a troubling link between, or relationship between the Republican primary electorate and racism?
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's listen, we can go back to what was it? Colin Powell's chief of staff said back in the Bush presidency that look, our party is full of racists. Like
Yeah.
this is not a secret. It's just that they anytime called out about it or pointed out, they argue against it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And but look at their actions. Look what they've been
But there's
doing.
a
Look what they do with
difference, right?
voting. Look what they do with any of history that doesn't paint a certain narrative. Look what Republicans are doing in Texas with the history books as far as slavery,
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
they were
Right.
unpaid laborers and trying to take that out of the entry.
Yeah.
Right.
This is
But,
what they
my point is this, though. There's a difference between being full of racists and thinking, making a political calculation as an astute politician, right? That saying this would be a net negative. I'm going to lose more votes than I'm going to gain by saying that. So she's making a calculation implicitly
absolutely.
that there are more racists than non-racists in her party.
Abs-
Yeah.
I would bet,
I, re-
I would probably
I,
put money that majority of the candidates, especially at her level, would have done the same thing.
uh-huh.
I don't know. You think so?
Yeah.
It's still, I guess, again, because I'm a New Yorker who doesn't like mustard on his burgers, like, right? It's hard for me to wrap my head around the
But
idea that in 2024, a candidate running for president of the United States is afraid to say slavery was the cause of the Civil War. Our boy Isaac, who was on here a couple of weeks ago, he just became
Mike,
hold on a
the
second.
thing
Let me say
is
this.
that
Hold
but
on a
Mike,
second. Hold on a second. He just
uh-huh.
became, our boy Isaac became an American citizen recently. He said one of the questions on the citizenship test was, what was the cause of the Civil War? The answer was slavery. I mean, it's a pretty black and white thing at this point.
Yeah, but
No
do
pun
they give you
intended.
choices,
All right.
or they give you choices, or they just say slavery? Slavery was the
States'
cause of the
rights was an
Civil War.
acceptable answer to that question.
Right.
Huh?
So, I mean, listen, we know what the truth is, but we also know what the Republican and conservative side, the extreme right side, the whatever you want to call it, we know that their position has always been that it was a states' rights issue, right? That was the Confederacy thing, or at least that they wanted
Uh-huh.
to say in public after the fact. During the time, they were, pretty out in public about, yeah, this is about our slaves as well, but they also want to frame it as a states' rights issue.
And here's the thing. If
Yeah.
you look at the document that South Carolina produced when it was seceding from the Union to join the Confederacy, they talk about, I think, the awesome, quote unquote, institution of slavery, something like that. Like, slavery is right in there. So
Right.
it's not some
Uh-huh.
kind of wacky conspiracy theory that Democrats or liberals have come up with all these years later to make it about slavery. It was literally in their succession document. That's why they were seceding.
I would
So
be more
what?
surprised if a Republican presidential candidate had answered that it was about slavery than
Really? That's such a,
I
that's
would.
such a
Yeah.
layup question.
But
Because
why did
you can
she?
still
Who
take the
asked her
Republican
about
view.
that?
You can
Who
still
asked her?
say, listen, as a Republican candidate, she could have said, yeah, it was about slavery and that was wrong, but we've made such great progress. So many strides since then. Talk about, and she could have even used a tired line of how Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. He got us out of it. She could have done all that stuff and still
But she
admitted that
no.
slavery was the cause.
Yeah,
But
because Bubba's
yeah,
not going to hear that. Bubba doesn't want to hear that nonsense.
Someone
yeah.
said to me that a big part of the reason is because it would be admitting that your great grandparents were
Yes,
in the South.
yes, absolutely. It's admitting
Mhm.
that grandma, grandpa, great grandma, grandpa were all trash, and people aren't going to do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Plus, it also admits a whole host of other things. It admits the talk about racism in the country, systemic racism in
Mhm.
the country, what happened during Jim Crow, the effects that are still
Yeah.
lasting, stuff that's still
A-
going on that none of them want to, no one on that side wants to admit to, because it upsets different ideals, some ideals
Right.
about how they were able to get to their position because they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps because they had
Right.
no help. They did it all themselves, or because they were
And,
able to do it from their own
well,
work. Like it's
and that's why
no.
I said, Mike, she's trying to be very shrewd in how she answered the question because she knows, depending on how she answers that question, it's just what Jay has said. So she
She knew
was
what she
trying to answer it in a way where um, she wasn't trying to offend, I guess, her base.
That's very telling, though, right? That if that's the calculation
it is.
that you have to say this,
Yeah,
I think
because
that's
see, like
very
I said,
telling.
somewhere along the line, and I've researched this, and I've read books on the Civil War and different authors on why it happened and why and what was the cause of it, and that's why I said somewhere along the line, she has done some sort of research on this topic because. Reality, Mike, she does not have a direct connection to that.
She's running for president. She should do better. Jay, do we have any
I
updated
agree.
results?
I agree. She should do better. So what you say, Mike?
Do we have any updated results on the Republican side right now from New Hampshire?
Oh yeah. On the Republican side, let me pull that back up. Where are we at? All right. So on the Republican side, there's 17% reporting in at this moment. Donald Trump is at 54.2%. Nikki Haley is at 44.8.
Mm,
That's close. I mean,
yeah, it is.
if she
Yeah,
can
that's about
maintain
3,000 votes.
right, if she can maintain with being within 10 points coming out of New Hampshire, that actually gives her some cause to go into South Carolina and say, listen, I was your governor, I'm a hometown girl, and I have a real shot at winning this, right? I think if she's below 10 coming out of tonight, it spells doom for her and she might be dropping out a lot sooner. So we'll see how long she can keep this up.
Yeah, we'll see. And then on the Democratic side, it's about 23% reporting in, and the unprocessed write-in is still um, leading the way by far with 73.8% of the vote.
So it seems like that write-in campaign was successful on the Biden side. We'll see
It
how
was,
it actually turn out. They're not going to be writing votes for Dean Phillips, who's on the ballot, so that does bode well for Biden there.
right.
One thing I wanted to mention as, I guess, just another point as to why the order and who votes first does tend to have an effect. Maybe it even can account for why this is close tonight. The small town of Dixville Notch, it's called.
I'm sorry, what?
It's called Dixville Notch. It's a small town in New Hampshire.
Say that again? I'm sorry, I'm being childish.
Are you trying to just chop this up and have a soundbite that you can use later on?
I'm just being childish. Did you say Dixville Notch? What?
Yeah, that's the name of the town. And it's
Okay.
close to the Canadian border. It's a very small population. In fact, they only have 6 registered voters in the whole town. They, as a tradition, right, they vote at midnight. So they're the first actual votes in the country.
Okay.
And all 6 of them voted for Nikki Haley over Trump. Now, it just so turned out that I believe she personally met with 5 of them because she knew they were going first. But this, again, goes, it speaks to the fact that it does matter, right? Because this created a story. And, it's kind of a fun, great little silly thing. But nonetheless, when the story coming out of it is, well, at midnight, six people voted, all six of them voted for Haley. She won 100% of the votes there. That might make her seem stronger than some people might have thought in other parts of the state when they go vote, right? Because some people might have thought, oh yeah, this is just a done deal. She can't win. What's the point? But if they see she's getting 6-0 wins over Trump in Dixville Knox, maybe more of them will come out and support her. And maybe that accounts in part for what we're seeing tonight.
I think what that is evidence of to me is the importance of candidates actually being present, right? And we noticed that back even first started running like in 2012 when we didn't have the kind of money to spend, and we noticed that basically a lot of candidates throw money at these campaigns to get people out when they can't really be everywhere, but we had to be everywhere, right? And so her being there and touching and talking to those people is probably what influenced them to vote, because they actually met the candidate. You know what I mean? So I think that shows a testament to that, to actually being
that's very powerful, and something I tell candidates all the time, especially to your point, if they're going up against someone who is more organized, has more money, has more name recognition, right? More established, more ingrained, all those things, right? You think, oh, I'm an underdog, it's an uphill battle. One advantage you have over them is you actually can be, because you don't have a choice, but you can get there and you can meet more voters, you can touch more people, right? You can be in their face, you can talk to them, you can meet them, you can see them. And yeah, that does resonate. It does have a strong effect. I mean, think about it, especially in a primary, right? I mean, in a general election, you can say, well, maybe they'll vote more along their ideological beliefs or whatever. But think about a primary where people think that the candidates more or less are aligned. Maybe there's some subtle differences, but overall, they kind of have the same kind of policy ideas, right? Well, who are you partial to? The person you feel like you know and you met, or the person that you never saw? And then people say things like that. Well, at least they showed up. They took the time to come and see me, and listen to me, and then you kind of feel like you're voting for someone that like, oh, that'd be cool if they became president. I met them. I can say I met the president. That's thing. So
and I think that also presents opportunity for people reaching moderate voters, who are not so like hardline one way or the other. If you have that personal connection and that good experience, you may be able to change some minds. So,
well, I'm going to sign off. It was good to have this discussion. And next time, Taylor, I won't be timid. I'll call you Jay. I won't be so nice.
You were too nice.
You got to be nice with her.
Yeah, she was too nice to Nikki Haley. I agree.
I think she was too nice to Nikki Haley, saying, well, maybe essentially you were saying maybe she's wrong because her research just happened to be wrong. No, she was purposely wrong. She was purposely wrong. She didn't just pick the wrong book. You're just being too nice.
I have to answer in a way where I'm not, I have to answer in a way where, you have to be careful about taking up sides.
Yeah, but hold on a second. You shouldn't be afraid to take up the side of the truth, though. Right?
Yeah.
If one side is right and one side is wrong, she'd be like, well, I'm going to be balanced, be half right, half wrong.
Yeah. So, well.
As always, it's great to talk to you. And Sheba, next time, please come on with the burger from Burger King.
I certainly will. I certainly, and I'll try to get one to you, Tim. I'll try to get one to you. If it doesn't, maybe I could jet it there, supersonic.
A burger or a T-shirt?
A burger.
No, he doesn't want a burger.
I won't eat the burger. Listen. I did total 6 years working in Burger King. That's how I paid my way through college, and I made many a hamburger and cheeseburger, and all of them with mustard. That's the recipe. But it appears, like I said, it might be a New York thing, and I did see online apparently maybe some parts of New Jersey as well for some reason.
Jay, what were the causes of the Great Hamburger War?
Yeah.
Slavery. It was absolutely slavery.
It was mustard.
Have a great week, and I'll let you know how the launch goes.
Okay.
Please. All right. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sheba.
Bye-bye.
All right. So
yeah. Just looking as a check-in on the New Hampshire primaries, there's a few more percent points reporting in, and it looks like unprocessed write-ins is gaining more ground. Dean Phillips was previously at 22.5% of the votes. Now he's down to 21.2. So it looks like there's even more going into the write-in. So maybe that campaign was successful. And again, it hasn't, they're unprocessed, so they're not attributed to anyone yet. So that doesn't
Right.
mean that they're all Biden.
Yeah, that could be
Matter
for
of
Mickey
fact,
Mouse.
yeah, matter of fact, Joe Biden write-in on the ballot is at 0% because nothing's been attributed yet.
Right. So we'll see.
So we'll see.
But it seems likely. I mean, if he's got 22% and the write-ins what 70-something%, that's not a good sign.
73.7. That's a massive
Yeah. So I
difference.
predict that that Biden will beat Phillips with the write-ins.
Yeah, and the Republicans have no write-ins.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So
So
very
I wanted to speak about while we're talking about elections. You know, I practice election law, and a question often comes up about candidates petitioning for themselves. Right now, we just talked about how when you're a candidate, it's important to go out there and meet the voters. Right, certainly very important. But a lot of candidates think that they're going to be the ones carrying the petitions. Right. Of course, you get petitions and signatures on the petitions to qualify for the ballot. In some states, like when you're running for president and other offices, you can actually just pay a fee to get on the ballot instead of petitioning. In New York, you have to petition. So there's a pitfall to this, and a lot of candidates don't want to hear it, especially when they don't have the money to hire people. But from a legal point of view, and please don't take this as legal advice, right? I'm not your attorney if you see this on a YouTube video or something like that. It's general information. But it is something to be mindful of where if you are the candidate and you're petitioning and you're witnessing your petition sheet, right? Because on the bottom of the petition sheet, you fill out a little statement saying that you were the one who witnessed these people signing the petition. You are opening yourself up to legal challenges that wouldn't be there if you were not on the petition. And so really it is beneficial for you to have other people doing that. You might need to hire people. And in fact, you often need to hire people, you know, maybe depending on the seat, you can do it with a bunch of volunteers, whatever it is. You should not be the one personally engaged in a petitioning process. Now, what you could do is you could have people walking with you. And so, you know, if you want to use it as a chance to meet voters, you still can, but have someone holding the petition who's a qualified voter, right, who's able to do that, actually being the one to get the signatures, and you can just be there talking to them and campaigning and doing what you do. But it's important that your name isn't on that. And there's a very specific legal reason why that is, which I think is kind of interesting. Do you have any idea what it might be?
conflict of interest.
Not exactly. Actually, it's fraud. And to set this up, if you want to challenge someone's petition, because what happens is you get your signatures, and we know you've got to get more times than are required to be safe, right? Because opponents will scrutinize them and try to knock you off the ballot. A lot of people don't realize that the Board of Elections on their own doesn't go and scrutinize all the signatures for all the candidates. You know, it's way too much for them to do. Right. And the law, in fact, is that they're presumed to be valid if they're in the proper format, unless proper challenges are mounted against them, right? And so actually it's opponents, oftentimes on behalf of the actual candidates running against you, or maybe just people who don't support you, support someone else, whatever it is, right? They're the ones, voters in your district, in your area, they're the ones who are going to be mounting these challenges. They're going to be saying to the Board of Elections, hey, this person shouldn't actually be on the ballot, because even though they submitted a petition with what looks like enough signatures, their signatures don't qualify, right? Either they come up short, they don't have enough valid signatures, they're no good, you know, for whatever reason, they'll find legal arguments, right, to attack the petition. So one of those legal arguments is fraud. But it's an interesting thing with petitioning, because petitioning is a way for voters to express that they want someone on a ballot. So it doesn't have to be the candidate directly involved in it. It could just be anyone. Like if I wanted you to be a certain, position in my community, I could petition your name for the ballot. Now you could decline it if you wish at the end, but I have a right to go around getting signatures and saying, hey, listen, 10,000 people want Jay to be the senator or whatever, right? So
I'm with that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'll take it.
So what happens in the case of fraud now, right? What happens if I, as someone who's not connected to you or your campaign in any way, I just take it on my own to go around, get signatures and submitting them, and it turns out that it was done in a fraudulent way? Should you as a candidate or as your campaign be punished for that, right? So the answer is generally no. What generally happens is you can use fraud as an attack on a petition to disqualify signatures, right? So you can say these signatures were obtained fraudulently, therefore these signatures shouldn't count, and it would just be reduced from your total. The legal standard now, if you want to disqualify someone for fraud, aside from getting them below the threshold, is the petition has to be permeated with fraud, meaning, you kind of look at it and it's just infected like a virus. Everywhere you look, there's fraud. And then that kind of just raises this legal.
It makes the candidate looks like a fraud, like he committed fraud.
It raises the legal notion that you petitioned fraudulently, right? Even if you weren't able to specifically find enough instances to knock them below the threshold, it was permeated with fraud. So it just kind of cast doubt on the whole operation. So there's that, right? So for a long time, it was just that. So to disqualify someone for fraud, if you couldn't get them below the threshold with your fraudulent accusations, you had to show permeation. Well, there were instances of candidates themselves and campaigns themselves engaging in fraud. And when they were attacked, right, they were challenged, called out on this in court, their defense always was, okay, you can disqualify these fraudulent sheets that we may have collected here or these fraudulent signatures, but the petition isn't permeated with fraud and therefore we still qualify. At a certain point, and this is New York case law, so don't apply this elsewhere, but in New York, it was decided in a court that there's an exception to this permeation standard, and that's if the candidate or if the campaign directly is involved in fraud, even a minimal amount will disqualify the petition. So what does this mean? If you're challenging a petition of an opponent, right, and you see that the candidate was involved directly in the petitioning, you know that to disqualify their whole candidacy, you only have to find a very small amount of fraud. So you will scrutinize, like let's say they witnessed 3 pages and there's 20 pages total in the volume. You'll scrutinize the hell out of those 3 pages, trying to find something that doesn't look right to try to argue is fraud. And then, you'll win it or you'll lose it, but it gives you a case now. Now you can go to court and say, Your Honor, the law is if the candidate participates in fraud, they're disqualified. We have reason to believe that there's fraud on these 3 sheets. They should be disqualified. Now you're in court. Whereas if the candidate's name was never on those petitions, that case could be made. Right. And they can only disqualify you if they find so much fraud where it's like everywhere, but they can't get at you for just a small amount of, one discrepancy that they find, which might not actually be fraud, but maybe they think there's an argument there. Right. So that's why, from a legal point of view, it's not advisable for the candidate to go and witness their own petitions.
Right.
So,
yeah.
As an election attorney, I deal with this often. This comes up, right? They'll come to me and they'll say, I'm going to go out and petition. And I tell them, have someone else with you. Don't be the one to witness them.
Right. Makes sense. And if you get in trouble, then now you can go on and point to this video and use the Scala defense.
Yeah. So it's not legal advice, but it is general information.
Right.
Election law. And, I find all this interesting because a lot of people ask me, so what is election law? What does it mean? What do you do? And there are a lot of interesting wrinkles like that, right? And that's why it's important to have a lawyer or someone who knows what they're doing in that area to kind of guide the process and tell you, oh, wait a minute, there are certain pitfalls here. Because it might seem easy. Oh, all I got to do is get a petition. Signatures on a sheet. That sounds easy. But there are so many ways that you can screw up. It's like a landmine, right? Like there's so many things that you could do that will blow up your whole campaign. And so you really need to have someone to help you navigate that process.
How different places do law and processes of law can be interesting sometimes. I recently was having a conversation, actually, yesterday, about a law out here, because there was a YouTuber, Johnny Somali. I don't know if we mentioned him, but he got arrested back in November in Japan.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Right, for being a public nuisance, and he was trespassing on construction sites and this and that. So he finally got arrested after months of doing crazy stuff just for his streams. And so according to the law here, they can hold you for up to 23 days before they have to, for 23 days before they have to release you, and they have to decide if they're going to prosecute you, what they're going to prosecute you for. If they do, then it goes to court, and then they can hold you during the duration of the trial. If they can't present what they're going to prosecute for, they have to release you. So what they do, Japan has a 99.9% conviction rate. And so what they do is they only prosecute what they know that they can win. Mm-hmm. So they build their case. So in that 23 days, they're trying to build their case to decide what they're going to prosecute for. So, for example, what they have is this thing called sai taiho, which is rearrest. So let's say you did something and in the process of I don't know, whatever it was, you committed like three different acts in the process for it. So they arrest you for the first thing, hold you for 23 days, then release you if they're not ready to prosecute to make the prosecution. They'll release you as soon as you step foot out of the police station. They'll arrest you again on the second thing. So now they got another 23 days,
Oh
and
wow.
they'll keep doing that until they either exhaust what they can arrest you for, or they decide that they're going to go ahead and charge you with whatever it is.
So they'll arrest you for one thing at a time to buy them 23 more days.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and isn't it crazy? It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's just funny how different places have different types of laws and whatnot.
Yeah. Weren't you telling me once in Japan you tried to assert your rights to a police officer and they were like, we don't care about that here, or something like that?
No, no,
ID.
no. But
ID.
no, there were two instances. One, it's I didn't have my ID on it. But there was one where a police officer actually tried to put his hands in my pockets
Mm.
uh to go through, and I wouldn't allow him to do that. And I was like, can't do that. And he kept saying, it's like, yeah, we can. We're the police. I'm like,
Yeah, I
I'm
thought
like,
one time also they asked you for your ID and you said like I don't like you can't just ask me for my ID randomly and they said we can't hear.
no, that I think there's two different instances.
Yeah.
Actually, technically, as a foreigner in Japan, and resident, I have to carry my residence card everywhere with me, my ID, and I have to present it when asked.
Hmm.
That's law for that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm totally aware of that. In one case though, I don't know, didn't feel like being bothered, and I was like, ah, I don't understand you. I don't know what you're talking about. I can't speak Japanese. And I was hoping he'd go away, but he didn't. But
Oh.
he was very, very polite, and I was clearly the prick in that situation. But this other one was when this police officer, I showed him, he asked for my ID. I showed it to him as I'm supposed to. And he asked for a second form of ID with a picture on it, which is not part of the law and which
Mm.
I didn't carry. And I'm like, I don't have one. And he's like, well, what about like an insurance card, about this and that, or anything else? I'm like, I don't have anything else. I'm
He's
giving you
talking
what
to
I'm
you
supposed.
in Japanese.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm giving you what I'm supposed to give you. I don't have anything else. You see clearly everything is above board. There's no issue. He was just harassment at that point. And then he tried to stick his hands in my pockets. And I'm like, you can't do that. And he's like, no, yeah, we can. This is Japan, or yeah, we're the police. We can do it. So,
Wow.
so
And they're
but
allowed to do that kind of thing over there?
no, they're not. They're not
Oh,
allowed to do
okay.
that. But he was just basically harassment at that point. It has stepped up a little bit in the past 20 years, I'd say, even more so in the last 10, to the point where about 3 or 4 years ago, even the U.S. State Department issued a warning to foreigners about police and unprovoked
Mm.
stops.
Wow.
And then there was a law consortium in out of Tokyo, lawyers that did a study, a survey, to find out about these types of stops. This was like not last year, the year before. So people are looking into trying to kind of nip it in the bud before it gets even worse. So,
Yeah. All right.
but
Well,
generally it doesn't happen.
we do have to sign off here soon, but we had poll results from last week to go over real quick.
Yes. Yes, we have a poll results from last week. We asked, should naturalized citizens, or no, let me get the full wording. Do you believe that naturalized citizens who were not born in the U.S. Should be eligible to run for president? This was kind of spurred by Cenk. I don't know if I got his name right, from the Young Turks.
Cenk Uygur.
Um, Cenk Uygur running for president and challenging that provision in the Constitution, saying that it's what violation of the 14th Amendment, and he's being discriminated against for not being born here or whatnot.
Right. That's
So,
essentially his argument.
right. And so we put that to the poll, and um, we got a sizable amount of votes here, and surprising results, actually.
Hmm. Surprising?
Um, su Surprising to me. So 15% said yes, they believe they should be eligible. 76% said no, 9% said I'm not sure.
That's not too surprising. It's about what I thought it would be.
I was thought it was going to be a hard no,
Oh, so even
even
more than the 70s, like 90 something percent.
even more. However, the comments, there's quite a number of comments here, and it seems like the comments overwhelmingly are no. I didn't see any yes comments at
There
all.
was something posted to the YouTube. Did you see that?
Yeah, so we
The
ran the
same guy, he
poll.
left 3 comments, and then he did the thing that he was accusing us of doing. It's kind of weird. Did you see that? He said,
Yeah,
he
I
said
saw that.
something like, you guys aren't constitutional scholars. You guys are just saying how the court is going to decide without providing an analysis. And then he said, of course, he can't run for president. End of story. He didn't provide any analysis. We provided a lot more analysis than he did. Last week, we went over the whole 14th Amendment, and we went over Article 2 of the Constitution, and we talked about what his argument was and why he thinks it's a good argument, but it's really not so good. I mean, we did all of that. So
Right.
he just gives a conclusion, and then he said, that's what we're doing. No, we're talking about this for a long time. I don't know what he was listening at or looking at.
Right. And for him to I mean, I would just wonder if he actually listened to the show to have this conclusion, or he just saw the title and he saw the thumbnail and was like, I've got something to say. So, um, but even on the video that ran on YouTube, the comments were no, 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 no. One was like, check the Constitution, their kids can run when they're 35. So
Check the
yeah,
is that they haven't been following the 14th Amendment argument, right? Because they're not explaining why they think that's a bad argument. We did that, by the way, last week. If you want to go back and watch,
right.
they're doing that in the comments, or are they saying just check the Constitution? Yeah, because this guy is actually bringing cases about this, and he's filing appeals, presenting a legal argument that the 14th Amendment's equal protection clause supersedes the natural born citizen
Right.
clause, right, of Article 2. So he's got an argument there. Again, I don't think it's a great argument. I think it's a losing argument myself, and I explained why last week. But
Right.
I would like to see if any of the people in the comments who were saying just read the Constitution, are they addressing these 14th Amendment arguments he's making?
Um, not that I'm seeing. Not that I'm seeing. So, and absolutely in the YouTube comments, it definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
But there is, you know what, there might have been someone here. Because I mentioned that about the 14th Amendment. Let me see what this comment says. The specific outweighs the general. If the Constitution didn't specifically list the restrictions on who can become president, then perhaps equal protection could be applied to strike down a law requiring presidents to be natural-born citizens. I don't think he's really adding any meaningful twists to the election. I don't think he'd have any meaningful impact if he were eligible.
Okay, so that was the comment said.
That was a comment, yeah.
That part about the specific outweighs the general, that's
Right.
actually very smart. And that's actually part of what the court decided, who ruled against him, right? That the provisions of the Constitution relating to the requirements, the qualifications for president are specific provisions about running for president. The 14th Amendment provisions are general provisions about equal protection, right? Essentially not being discriminated against, yes. But those are general provisions, and he's trying to apply these general provisions about equal protection to specific provisions about the qualifications for president, and the court wasn't buying that. The court was saying these two provisions of the Constitution are not inherently in conflict because one talks about a very specific thing, one talks about general things. And so, yes, the specific will take precedence over the general.
Right. Is that the lex specialis?
Yeah, I was looking at that car, but I decided to get the 4-cylinder.
Say what?
So I was looking at that car, but I decided to go with the 4-cylinder instead.
What?
It sounds like a Lexus.
I gotcha. That seems like the only comment that I could find from a quick scan that addressed that specifically. Everything else, there's one here that says, I could see it if the qualifications were changed slightly, like to enable DACA recipients who pass the citizenship test, but I wouldn't say I was in favor of changing the Constitution for this purpose. The loyal argument is not so much of a concern for me anymore, considering MAGA's attempt to overthrow our democracy. I mean, anyone can be bought for the right price.
Hmm.
But interesting
And,
that it would be interesting for that they'd be in favor or see a path for DACA, but just not anyone else that took the citizenship
well,
test.
the interesting thing is if you apply the equal protection argument, it wouldn't only protect naturalized citizens. We talked about that last week too.
Right.
If you're saying that equal protection requires strict scrutiny to be applied to any form of discrimination on the basis of national origin, which is constitutional doctrine, right? That's true. That doesn't only apply for citizens. That applies for any discrimination on the basis of national origin. And so if you're really following this argument to its logical conclusion, you're saying that anyone could run for president, citizen or not, because you can't discriminate based on where someone is from.
Right. And some people brought up some other issues as well, and we talked about it as far as foreign governments. If it was open like that, then foreign governments, I mean, absolutely, I think Putin would definitely plant someone here to try to get a hand in the presidency, and he wouldn't be the only one. I would imagine a bunch of different countries. I think Israel would do it, China would do it, you know, and if it was the same in other countries, I'm sure the U.S. would do the same thing to try to get someone in the race that would be favorable.
But is the natural born citizen thing an American concept?
Um, in a lot of places, I think it is an American. I don't think everyone is. Everyone has a natural born citizenship.
I think it's more of an American thing, but I do think that you have more restrictions in other countries about your blood, essentially, right? Your ethnicity,
Right. So your parentage or something.
Yeah. We don't do that in America because we're a country of immigrants. So we look more
Right.
to if you're born here, you're American, right?
Right.
So it kind of is a distinctly American concept in a sense.
So,
but also it does strike you a little bit as an arbitrary distinction, right? I mean, if you're a citizen, you're a citizen. Should it matter if you're born here or not?
I think it should, because of and we've seen it. We've seen as far as um, even our government meddling in the affairs of other countries so that they could curry favor or that they could get the outcome that they desire.
Mm-hmm.
We want that access at the highest office of the land. I don't think we do. And some people brought up in the comments the potential for people that would open the potential for people like Elon Musk and Rupert Murdoch to run for president. And we're talking about the richest people on the planet and who would be the types of guys that would want.
So you're saying someone who just becomes very wealthy and then sets up shop in America, and now because they got so much money and power here, they go for the White House.
And absolutely would. I mean, they absolutely would. I mean, financially, it doesn't really make that much sense for someone who is a billionaire to do it. It's the power.
Mm-hmm.
You can increase your wealth a lot more, but you also have access to just everything. And we're looking at, like, we want the guy who runs Fox News to be, or who started Fox News to be eligible, or Elon Musk to be eligible.
But what if it was someone like that who was born in America? I mean, are we presuming that all these this type of, for lack of a better term, is going to be a foreigner? I mean, it could be American made too. But
it could be American.
What about the provision that you have to be a resident for 14 years? Does that not do anything to prevent a plant? I mean, you would have to be growing this plant for 14 years.
Well, yeah. I mean, what, you don't think they would? I mean, think about
it wouldn't be like
undercover operations.
Yeah, but it wouldn't just be like we're gonna move someone in, they could become a citizen right quick and run for president. I mean, it would be a very long-term operation, right? Decades in the works.
To take over a control of a country, I think it'd be a long-term operation that they would do. They do years, decades in the making. However, going through this, I was thinking
a long time.
Yeah. To have your hand at the control of the largest economy on the planet and the biggest military.
You're putting 14 plus years, and really probably more than that to actually get someone to become a citizen and all those things. So you're putting 14 plus years into the process to take a gamble. I mean, there's no telling that you're going to win. And then what? You're going to try again for the next 20 years?
Well, it doesn't mean that you still got your resources. So that means Putin and all of his billions could flood in. And this is not saying that, pointing fingers at Putin did anything, but we did see how Russia interfered in our what was it, the 2016 election?
Yeah.
So they have the opportunity and the ability and the interest in influencing.
All right, well then let me give you this one. It's a fair point, but if they're really being that maniacal and devious and long-term planning,
I think I know where you're going to go, and I was going to say this.
Plans to make a baby here and then run them for president 35 years.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because while I'm going through these and I'm looking at different comments and I'm thinking, you know what, that's all possible, but it is very possible that they could send someone here, have a baby here, and they could just take the baby back to Russia, raise the baby, train the baby, do all of this stuff, and then have them come back here and run for president and still do the same thing. So it's
Right.
still possible.
Right.
In that,
If they want to do it, they're going to do it.
right.
Sounds like a good movie plot, though.
You know what? It does. It's kind of like, but you know what? It's like sleeper cells, right? Terrorist sleeper cells. And they do that. They go and they stay somewhere and they stay inactive for decades or whatever until it's time to do whatever their mission is. I mean, yeah. All right. So y'all heard it here first. Because we mentioned it here, we have the copyright. You can't
Poor
check
man's
this.
copyright. Let's write it up. Let's put it in the mail and send it to ourselves.
We've got video evidence.
That's true.
And a
We don't need a poor
timestamp.
man's copyright. We have a Zoomer's copyright.
Yeah. So we've got it. This is ours. So Hollywood, we are going to be looking. If anything shows up on Netflix, we're coming for our cut.
Except for the fact that you can't copyright an idea. We have to write more, a little bit more than that. Let's write a treatment. And
All right, we'll get a treatment together.
Yeah.
I'll get on it right away. Chat GPT, where's our treatment?
Yes. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been an interesting discussion. As always, what is the bottom
We forgot
line?
the bottom line.
I was going to ask you, what is the bottom line?
I think the bottom line here, and I think the bottom line is that in 2024, and I know we say this a lot, like, oh, in this year we shouldn't be, but it's very ridiculous that we are openly and acceptably denying the truths of our history, like with Nikki Haley and talking about slavery not being or omitting that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. History has happened. We need to reflect on that, and we're supposed to learn from that so we don't commit that in the future. If you have an issue with what happened in history, I think that's a problem. It's something that happened. It's something that can't be changed. You may not like it. It may not be something that was palatable. It's what it was, but we have to recognize what it was and move forward in truth, or else we're just fooling ourselves.
Yeah. Well said. Doesn't do anyone any favors burying our heads in the sand.
No, it absolutely does not.
So this has been Nuance. As always, you can find us where things can be found in the world, right?
Yeah.
Facebook Live every Tuesday. We're on YouTube, Nuance with Mike Scala and Jay Carter. We're on Instagram at Nuance Show. We're on Reddit at Nuance Show. We're everywhere at Nuance Show. And
we're at Burger King.
Yes, we're at Burger King, and we're going to continue this very important investigation of where the mustard is. So we'll follow up on that groundbreaking coverage. I think this is the coverage that's going to win us an Emmy next year. So
right.
Nothing about the 14th Amendment and the Constitution and the presidential race or the local New York happenings and events or the guests that we bring on from around South Queens to talk to us about what they're doing in their communities. None of that. The mustard is where it's at, right?
Right. That's what it is. We got to find the mystery of the mustard.
That's it. So like, subscribe, share, cut the mustard with us, and catch you next week. We've got work to do and burgers to eat.